One of the most mysterious and crazy moments so far in the entire story of From was when Sara had a very mysterious and incredible moment when the words "killed the boy" were engraved onto her arm. These words "killed the boy" and why the voices told her that, even as we approach the third season of this story, are still one of the biggest questions we have. Before the series even began, Sara was already in communication with the mysterious voices. When Katri took her down into the church basement, he asked Sara why she believed the voices instead of assuming they were deceiving her. Sara explained to him that the voices told her that very soon there'd be two cars that come into Fromland. Those two cars ended up being the Matthews and Jade's cars coming into the town.
They told me those two cars were coming and to stand out near the edge of town and I would see. They said it happened before, that two cars came on the same day and everyone died. They said it was because of the people in the cars, but if I did what they said, we'd be safe. We'd get to go home.
And that was the first time in decades that two cars came in during the same time. The only other time we know it ever happened is when Victor was a kid. This event of two cars seems to be significant, and the writers are clearly implying that it happens before a massacre takes place in Fromland. But the most important thing by far about this entire interaction is that the voices make it clear that the bad things that happened were caused by the people who came in with the cars. So maybe this is hinting that the reason the voices told Sara to kill the boy was because they knew Ethan was going to do something that would end up very badly for the people of Fromland, and the voices were actually trying to protect them from these bad things happening to them. That's an interesting angle to consider about these voices and what their intentions might be.
They said they wanted to help, that they'd been here a long time, and they'd been waiting for someone to come who would hear them, someone who could help them escape, help them go home. They said they were just like us.
The voices told Sara that they were just like the townspeople. This is probably meant to imply that the voices themselves are also trapped in Fromland rather than just working for or being Fromland itself. They told Sara in the church basement that they've been waiting a long time for someone who was just like her, someone who could hear them, and obviously someone that they could pass the information they have on to. Assuming for now that they're being honest, this means that other Fromland residents don't have the ability to listen to what these voices are saying, and obviously goes back into the idea that everyone in Fromland has a different role to play in the game. We've seen time and time again that Sara in particular has a unique connection that allows her to perceive and specifically hear things that other characters simply cannot. And the most obvious is when Boyd took Sara and Kenny to the dungeon. Sara was the only one who could hear the music box while it was in the dungeon dimension. So her being able to hear the voices is an ability specific to her, which means Katri was absolutely right that Boyd can't afford to put her in the box, that he can't afford to execute her. The phrase "kill the boy" is actually a lot more vague than you might initially think because of the framing of the scene. It makes you think Ethan was who they were talking about, but maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was the boy in white who was the target all along. The boy in white is obviously a boy, and his intentions throughout the story remain a huge mystery. He was the one who sent Boyd into the dungeon, which was the entire reason Boyd got the worms and the music box, which he ended up infecting the townspeople with. The boy in white was also seen smiling and looked pretty happy after the massacre in Victor's flashback. It's almost like he was happy that it happened. Sara says in the season 2 finale that the boy in white isn't just a boy, and that's clearly meant to tell us that he's some sort of ancient entity himself, much like the jellyfish in the cave drawings. Or perhaps he and the jellyfish have always been one and the same, and he only takes the form of the little boy in order to seem non-threatening to the people he appears in front of. we already know that the entity or entities in Fromland have an affinity for using disguises to manipulate humans and to make them more likely to do whatever it is that the entity wants them to do in that moment. Of course, that's because they all have their agendas, and whether those agendas are in favor of the townspeople is impossible to say. The boy in white might just be who the voices wanted Sara to kill. Maybe he's the one responsible for everything happening in Fromland, and killing him might just be the key to ending everything. But on the flip side, it could be that the boy in white is the one trying to help these people, trying to save them and trying to get them home. It could be that the actions the boy in white keeps taking are all serving the ultimate goal of getting these people home and ending the jellyfish once and for all. He was the one who saved Victor and Julie as well as Tabitha, and maybe he showed her the way out of Fromland by pushing her out of the lighthouse. We're not quite sure where she ended up, but of course it seems like she actually made it out. There's also theories about him being the dog or working with the dog that might have led Boyd to the talismans, and if he really is out here working in favor of the townspeople, then if the voices are evil, perhaps being the monsters or the entity himself trying to deceive Sara and get her to make horrible choices to make the human situation was the intention all along, and thus killing the boy in white would be a huge win for the jellyfish if the voices are evil. It could have easily been the same type of manipulation that happened to Christopher in Victor's backstory, him following the voices' instructions under the delusion that doing so would get everybody home might explain how everybody got killed. Perhaps they told him by revealing all of the hiding spots of the humans, he would be able to save them somehow or something like that, and that's how they ended up getting killed. Apart from Ethan and the boy in white possibly being the intended target, it might also be someone else. Of course, I am talking about Victor. Forget about the moving trees, forget about the unchanging weather, and forget about the monsters. Victor surviving 40 years in Fromland to this day is the craziest thing I have ever heard in this entire show. And just to remember, Victor supposedly didn't have talismans in that entire time, and yet he somehow survived, seemingly without even getting a scratch from the monsters. He didn't even lose a toe or a finger or anything. It's absolutely insane. When was he even sleeping, especially considering there were some years when he was completely alone? Like, the entire thing sounds incredibly hard to believe, and that's why Victor being a mole, or Victor being the person who created Fromland itself, is such a popular theory, because him being somehow brainwashed into being a double agent for whoever the evil is in Fromland would perfectly explain how he was able to survive that long, as the monsters, I guess, would be instructed not to attack him, or maybe they put some sort of spell on him to prevent him from being attacked by the monsters. There's also an interesting theory that says Victor's mom sacrificed the entire town by showing their hiding spots in order to protect Victor, and this is something that Taran Mataru really likes talking about. That's a crazy theory, but it's a satisfying answer for why the monsters didn't kill him that entire time. Of course, him being the person for creating this land using some sort of godly ability he was born with is also a perfect explanation for the same reason, because he would be the creator of the monsters, so it makes sense that they would not attack him. Him losing his memory is also very convenient, as it allows the writers to say, oh, he just didn't remember that piece of crucial information for this and that reason. Like, oh man, amnesia is always a very convenient storytelling device. These things would all be valid reasons for the voices to refer to Victor when they said killed the boy rather than the boy in white or Ethan. I also want to mention that Ethan clearly has a very unique connection to Fromland, much like Sara. He repeatedly says things that shows he somehow has more information than everyone else in the story. Like he tells Jim at the diner that if they want to go home, they probably have to save somebody to do that, and he tells Tabitha that there might be somebody trying to help. The things that he knows are really crazy. This information he has might be the exact reason why the voices would have been targeting him specifically. Maybe his brain is calibrated in the exact right way for him to receive this information from some entity in Fromland or something like that. I don't know, but he clearly knows a lot. And that naturally makes me think of Toby. The voices told Sara to kill Toby as well, and it's possible they did so because Toby had some information about Fromland. They also seemed to have asked that Sara cut out Toby's tongue specifically, which maybe means removing his tongue prevents him from communicating from that other side. Maybe that's why Kill the Boy was written on Sara's arm rather than telepathically communicated to her, because the person who said it to her already had their tongue ripped out, so they can't communicate with her through the voice or whatever. I find it really hard to come to a conclusion on this entire thing because I can't decide whether the voices are evil or if they are acting for the overall good of the people. It's even likely that there's multiple groups among the voices with different goals. The reason why that seems to be the case is, for example, there was a voice that told Father Khatri, to come into Fromland. That's one voice. And then we had another voice or other voices talking to Sara, seemingly trying to get the people out. So bare minimum, there's two groups in these voices. And considering that Sara at the Bottle Tree was the first time she ever had a female voice, it's easy to say that there's even three groups at this point. Or maybe each voice has his own goals and there is no unity, period. All of them are just different voices, all trying to get their agendas fulfilled. So far, we have a lot of different variables to consider when it comes to the meaning of Kill the Boy and why they told her to do it. From Ethan to Victor and of course to the boy in white. Of those three people, who do you think was the intended target? And why do they want to target that person specifically? You tell me what you think. I have not come to a conclusion yet. This is one of the mysteries that I really want to see answered in the show. I really want this to be expanded upon in season 3.